Hi you guys, this is Rachel Kirkland here, the Modern Shaman. Thanks for being with me for another YouTube question and answer video of this week. If you're new to the channel, as always, I'm grateful you're here, and I would love to invite you to check out my website, which is themodernshaman.net. You can always send in your YouTube video questions there. That is where I kind of pool them. My assistant puts them into a folder, and then each week I just pull out a new question and answer them for you all. So this is all motivated by y'all's questions. So make sure that you keep sending those in. I would love to hear from you. Also, there is a ton of resources available on the website for one-on-one sessions, if that's something that you're interested in, and for furthered education. If you were like, this is my thing, I want to develop my gifts, I want to connect with my shamanic roots and really understand how to do shamanic healings. There are so many resources on my website, from online classes and teaching modules, really just to mentorship and all sorts of resources. Like, I feel like I've said that word, resources, like 15 times. But that's the hub of all things for the modern shaman, and really anything that is connected to like-minded people. I would love for you to check it out. All right, here's the question of the week that was sent in by one of you amazing people. My assistant kind of cut out or scratched out some of the parts that they sent in that had to do with like their name, so that it's so that there's anonymity and we don't know who sent this in. Okay, so it says, "Hi Rachel, thank you so much for the knowledge you give to people. I awakened my ability to feel energy in 2015 and then to hear voices in 2016. But the voices were negative, and it quickly became overwhelming. My father took me to a psychiatrist, and they forced me to stay in the hospital for a month and take anti-psychotic drugs. It is a long story, but my question is, can I still develop psychic abilities while being on anti-psychotic drugs? And what are your views on these drugs?" Great question. And thank you for sharing your story, sharing your heart. And I feel like this question will benefit so many people. First of all, you're not alone in that story. I will just share that a lot of clients, a lot of people that I work with, have similar experiences in response to their psychic gifts coming on, or having a full-on Kundalini awakening, or having a transformative even a shamanic wound experience where there's a physical ailment that literally transforms their life and all of their psychic gifts come in, or whether they've blocked them or people have repressed them, and then there's an onslaught later on in life, or people are scared of them. Others, when they've shared and then they've taken them into hospitals. It's just, I'm sorry to say, but your story is somewhat common to those that are gifted. And really, if we look at our historical past, a lot of those with psychic gifts of premonition and healing abilities and what others might deem as supernatural powers are very natural and very integrated into our being. But it can elicit fear and elicit kind of negative responses in those that don't understand, or even those that care a lot for you and don't know how to handle the situation. Their response can be really traumatic to us. So I'm sorry that you had to go through that, but I think it's so relevant for others to hear your story. So I thank you for sharing that, because I feel like that is a shared voice for many. And I know, just because I work with others as clients that have had similar stories to yours, or in some way, shape, or form resonate with what you've shared, even in past life experiences. So, all right, first thing I want to say about this is I want to advise you to know what you're taking. Okay, and this goes beyond just anti-psychotic drugs, but any drugs, even herbs, even just anything you're putting in your body. The first thing I would say is to fully know and understand what you're taking and how it impacts you. Okay, that's my first piece of advice, because what happens when we begin to take medications, and again, I'm broadening this out even beyond just antipsychotics, but what happens when we take medications is oftentimes we don't take the time to assess our own body and energetic response, and therefore we give the power away to the medicine, and we give the power away to a doctor, or we give the energetic vibrational power or dominance to something external. And so what happens is that becomes something that feels like it holds power over us, or we have an addiction to it, instead of understanding fully how our body is impacted. Once you understand how your brain responds, how your emotional body responds, how your diet responds, how your exercise, how your motivation, how it impacts your life, how it impacts your physiology, how it impacts your neurology, how it is impacting you. Once you know that information, you can use that in order to strengthen and empower your own personal process. Then it's something of the self. And that is a major difference than feeling like it is given to you by someone else and they're forcing you to do this and they're da-da-da-da. It becomes an element of free will, and you start to hold the vibrational dominance in the interaction with that medication, okay? And an example of that would be like a guru that takes some crazy, if you've ever heard this story, I don't know if you've followed Ram Dass, but Ram Dass always told this story, and I don't remember the name of his guru, but where he was doing all of these drugs. I think he was taking acid, or I don't know what he was doing, or LSD, maybe it's LSD. He's doing some sort of, psychotropic drugs, and he took them with him to India in hopes to meditate and to take them while he was doing that. Well, his guru was like, let me see the drugs, and he gave him this whole bag that he had there to be with him for the whole summer, and that guru just took them all. And normally that would create an overdose, right? But for some reason, Ram Dass was shocked because the impact was vibrationally null. It had no impact on that guru. It had no impact on his physiology. He didn't start puking or have diarrhea. He didn't react physically to the drugs. It's as if they had no impact. So that is an example of vibrational and energetic dominance over an external medicine or something that you put in your body. The same is true for food. The same is true for thoughts. The same is true for information. But basically, this is having an energetic dominance from the internal structure of the self beyond what comes in externally. So my first piece of advice is to know how it impacts you. So what I would suggest is that if you're taking something, that you have a journal and you note, how is this impacting me energetically? Am I motivated? Do I have more energy in the morning? Do I get tired and listless around 3 o'clock? You are assessing yourself. Don't leave that to the doctors. This is your own life, your own body, your own mental makeup. You assess how it's impacting you. And you've got to do it like you care about it. You can't be like, about it. Then you're just giving the power over to a medicine. You're giving the power over to someone else. And all too often, this is what happens. We get lazy with our own process. But you cannot do this when it comes to your own mastery of the self. And this is true for how it would take on and how it will strengthen or develop your psychic abilities. All right? So first, note that. Take a journal and process and learn how it's impacting you. How is it impacting your relationships? How is it impacting your emotional state? Are you angry more? Do you feel like you're less patient, or are you more patient? Or do you you don't care about anything? You have no motivation, or you have no emotional charge, no pleasure from food, whatever it is. Learn how the medicine is impacting you, because that information will be later on what you use to energetically hold dominance and over that vibration. So once you know how that medication is impacting you, and like I said, this is beyond just antipsychotics. This can be done with food. This can be done with people and how they're impacting you. Take energetic awareness and assessment of your own process in life. How is it impacting you, right? Notice it. Write it down. Chart it out and graph it out if you have to. Get to where your self-assessment is more important to you than giving the assessment to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Look at it yourself and look at it, give yourself a time period, a month, 6 months, whatever it feels like you need to kind of create a system to where you notice that level of processing, right? And honestly, if I get more specific into anti-psychotic drugs, those typically, and there's a lot of different ones, so I can't just kind of blanket them all together, but typically that focuses on neurotransmitters in order to balance your dopamine levels. And dopamine levels are, they're mostly associated with like Parkinson's and bipolar schizophrenia, which is associated with delusions and hearing the voices and that kind of thing. And so it kind of mitigates the polaric response in the dopamine levels, like the rush of things. Also ADHD, like the hyperactive, not ADD, but the hyperactive, which is that rush or the addictiveness to things that can come with offshoots of dopamine levels that are not kind of consistent with emotional response. So anyways, a lot of those try to regulate your dopamine levels. So understanding how your dopamine levels are affected, how that translates into your life, then you can look at the second piece of advice would be to gain energetic power or authority over your own experience. So the way that you would do this is before you take the medication, you would set the intention to hold a higher vibration of the self than the medication carries for you. So, and you can do this also, this translates even into walking in a room, setting the intention that my vibration is going to be the highest level, the most dominant vibration in this room. Okay, if you're walking into a room where you're afraid that people are going to try to take control of you or say something that has an impact, or you're going to feel weakened, or your self-worth is going to come into question, then set the intention that your vibration be the highest vibration or the most dominant vibration in the room. Now, this doesn't mean power. This means that you will vibrate at a level that will carry the rest. And so your intention becomes basically the leader, and you are the one calling the directives, not just your neurotransmitters. All right, you're setting the intention that you are doing that. You can set the intention that your dopamine levels stay at a certain number, at a certain level, that your energy levels stay at a certain level. You basically set that intention and you hold that vibrational state for a few seconds. Now, I would encourage you to activate all of your psychic senses when you're doing this. So to move into, close your eyes and you move into the visualization of light coming out of you, or moving into the body, or moving into the brain and the neurotransmitters and connecting. Our neurotransmitters, remember, probably should have said this at the beginning, are our communication device from the brain to the rest of the body. They're the bridge that says, hey, this is what you need to do, this is how you're supposed to feel, this is how you're supposed to react. It is the electric kind of charge that comes over from the brain and connects and communicates with the rest of the body. So you can set that intention that the communication be clear, be strong, be evident in your own sense of directive from you first before taking the medication, that the medication be supplementary or support what your original intention is, that this medication is only going to support the balance of my dopamine levels, or it's only going to support my psychic development. It's only going to support whatever it may be that you want it to do. You set that intentional purpose, and that the medication be secondary to your own vibrational intent, and that your vibrational intent be primary or the most dominant directive in your experience. All right? So that's my second piece of advice. The third piece of advice, or the third thing I would have you do here, is make sure that you set up psychic boundaries. So if you are wanting to re-engage and redevelop your psychic gifts, you can always do that. No matter what medication you're on, that again is a choice of your free will. So from that space, and you're, depending on your developmental level, I don't really want to make it hierarchical, but just think about cognitive development, like how you grow up and process as a human, right? How your brain develops from where you're 5 years old to where you're 10 years old to where you're 15 to where you're 20. There's all this cognitive development and growth. And depending on where you are in your developmental phases, psychic development, connection to the non-physical world, to spirit, to hearing voices, to seeing in your clairvoyance, to having powerful dreams and imagery. All of this is available to you from the minute that you are here to the minute that you die, because this is integrated. This is who you really are. This is our native form. Okay? This is your most natural way to communicate telepathically. It is the most natural. We have to learn as humans how to use words and language, and that varies from country to country, from people group to people group, versus region. And I mean, there's so much that's harder about being human than about being spiritual and developing your spiritual gifts. That is innate. It is organic and innate in you, because you are soul before you are human. All right. And then we just try to fit it into this human experience and expression, and kind of that's usually what trips us up. But you have access to it as a child, as a 5-year-old, as a 10. So there's no time where your cognitive development or your maturation, your maturity level is going to impede you from connecting with spirit. It's just going to connect you on different levels of understanding, meaning you will be able to connect with spirit as a child, and you may explain that to an adult, or you may process that in a very different way. You may say, oh, I'm having an imaginary friend and they're coming here, and then we may grow up and be a teenager and we're like, oh, I'm connecting with my spirit guides and I feel God's presence in my prayers. And then you may mature into an adult and you may have dialogue and be asking and be using a pendulum and be working and hearing clairaudient voices and helping you discern the processes. So depending on where you are, you will always have available contact. That third piece of advice is to create psychic boundaries dependent on where you are. And this is so important because it sounds like to me you missed this step when you were younger. And a lot of times we do. I missed this step too. There's no judgment here. No one taught me how to have psychic boundaries. I had to learn it the hard way. All right? Most of us do in life, right? That's the true learning. So you're going to need to create boundaries for what feels like is a negative experience for you with the non-physical. So I have videos and I have teaching modules on creating boundaries for spirit, on how to set rules and regulations and guidelines about how spirit can interact with you, the distance they should hold when they speak to you, how to mute voices when you want to mute them, how to turn up the volume, how to have control psychically with techniques of developing your clairaudience and gaining that skill. So that's my third piece of advice to you, would be to create boundaries and use psychic techniques to where you feel like you have again, a sustained sense of self-control, self-understanding, and understanding with the non-physical world that you're not just opening your front door to any psychic voice that wants to speak to you through your clairaudience. That you have regulations. We don't just open our front door to let anybody and all people come into our household, right? There are rules there. You take off your shoes before you come in my house. Introduce yourself before you just walk in here. I need to know why you're here. What is your business with me? Create boundaries for you that say that I will only speak with voices that introduce themselves to me. I will only speak to voices that show themselves in their true and original and pure form. I will only speak to celestial angels that have a highest vibration of love and purity. I will only speak to individuals that have the highest intention for me in terms of my growth and my love and my purpose on this earth. Something that feels supportive. Now, those are just examples, but use a language that creates rules and regulations for spiritual guidelines in the psychic realm that enable you to develop with safety. Because if you have fear around your past trauma of what the negative voices that became overwhelming and you weren't able to control them, you need to create that first, is that psychic development of spiritual boundaries, of saying what you are okay with interacting with and what you're not. And then getting those in place, how to implement those. There's a stature, a stance, there's a posture, there's a vocalization, there's a literal hertz that we hit, around 4 hertz in our tone, that takes the authority, that translates in vibration. And this is in my psychic development. I think that's in the clairaudient module, about how to hit that tone when we hit that certain frequency, and you know what, politicians know this, they're trained in it, vocalist coaches are trained in it, to hit that it's a frequency that's a lower frequency. It's why it develops trust, it develops authority, it develops essentially, it's a resonant tone of leadership. It's kind of like the alpha tone that we may speak when we talk with dogs and our animal training, where they listen, or the mama voice where you're like, oh, mama means business. We hit that tone when you're speaking out your psychic boundaries in that particular frequency and tone, in a posture and a stance of strength and authority. So your pranic tube, which runs up and down your spine, aligns your chakras and connects you in with the higher vibrational realms, and the earth, right? Connects all the way through the body. So there are techniques to how to bring about these psychic development boundaries and how to impact in authority and make them translate into the non-physical realm to be received. So that's my third piece of advice, is to do the psychic boundaries, to implement them into place. And then my fourth piece of advice to you is really to create a level of security and safety for yourself, and then develop practices. And anyone can do this. You ask, like, am I still able to develop your psychic abilities? Absolutely. You may feel them differently than were you not on the drugs, because your dopamine levels, but as long as you know yourself, which is why I had you do step 1 of know how the drugs impact you. If you know how it's impacting you, then you can still notice the subtle difference of the psychic realms, of how the voices are coming in, or how the vision and the colors are shifting, or the lines of frequency, or how your dreams are speaking to you. Again, there's so many different ways that spirit can speak to you. And once you know how the medications that you're taking are impacting your body, impacting your emotions, then you can see the subtle difference of when you start doing meditative practices and psychic techniques to develop your skills, to open that third eye again, to open up your sense of telepathic communication. And so when that starts happening, you notice the difference. And when you do, you validate the difference of what you're speaking to. You go through the practices of channeling. You go through the techniques. It's always available to you. Just like I said, no matter what age you are in development, no matter where your brain is, no matter how mature you are, how emotionally open or closed off you are, non-physical is innate in you. It's part of who you are. Your soul is something you can't separate yourself from, right? Spirit is who you are before you even take on the human brain and human language and all of this. And so it's always available. It's always available, no matter what. But you have to learn the sense of precision of understanding how it's communicating to you and how those medications are impacting you, so that you'll notice the subtle differences of when you start feeling the energy. How does that feel to you now? Are you feeling the tactile sensation of chill bumps? Are you feeling heat versus cold? Are you feeling sensations of pressure and contraction? Notice the difference, because again, in step 1, if you don't know how the medication impacts you, it's easy to mistranslate, right? Or to miss it because you're used to it speaking to you in a different manner prior to taking the medications. So if you go through those steps of really learning how the medication impacts you, right? And then taking that and moving into the empowerment of your emotional and vibrational and energetic state of yours being the dominant sense of how you are telling the medication to take a secondary precedence in your body, creating psychic boundaries for yourself to have safety, and then utilizing techniques and developing those, and then validating the subtle differences of strengthening what it is that you're connecting with, and developing that safe and kind of trusting environment with spirit. You can absolutely do it. Your last question that says, what are your views on these drugs? I don't take a strong stance on drugs like that. In the shamanic community, if someone comes to me and they say, I have bugs crawling inside my brain and I can feel them itching at me from the inside out, then as a shaman, I say, let's clear out the bugs. I don't go into this mental dialogue with, you're crazy and we need to get you we need to get the psychotic delusion of the bugs, not, I don't, this is what they're experiencing. This is the way that it feels to them. I just validate the soul's experience. So it's a very different space for a shaman to view someone, because we don't want to separate and create a fight between the brain and the soul. And so if someone comes to me and they are experiencing something and they're expressing it the way they're experiencing it, I would never devalidate or de-honor their experience. We just simply say, okay, this is your experience, and I'm going to help usher and change the experience in the way that you're desiring. You want to get those bugs out of your brain, do you see what I'm saying? I don't want to create friction or distrust of the self, because it breaks off, like when a psychiatrist or somebody, and I'm not against psychiatrists, I'm just saying it's a difference between the shamanic perspective and traditional or Western medicine that would kind of negate someone's experience. We would never do that. I would honor their experience and then help using the language that's relevant for them, because that's the way that they understand the feeling of it or the sensation of it or how it's impacting their body. And so I would use that language to help bring freedom from whatever it is that they're seeking freedom from. So my perspective on drugs it's not like a one size fits all on anti-psychotic drugs. I have had clients that they've been very helpful for, and that spirit has literally guided and channeled messages to be on them for certain periods of time, or that it would be helpful if clients have come to me and asked, like, should I be on this? Is it the right thing for me? I've had messages come in that say yes. I've had messages come in that say no. It's very individualized in where they are in that moment and how the drugs are impacting that person, what particular drug it is. So it's really hard to take an overall stance on it. And like I said, the shaman always seeks to honor the personal experience and then to utilize that experience to bring sovereignty and authority and freedom from any negative experience that they're having. So it's just a different perspective on drugs. We don't have kind of like a one size fits all, or this is good and this is bad. We don't really create that tension versus like honoring the experience and then trying to find harmony to where there's freedom from the things that we don't desire. So I think it's just a shift in perspective from the Western view of drugs. I hope that that's helpful to you. I realize this video is long. I'm sorry guys, but it was a hot topic. We will be back here next week with another video. Mwah! Blessings.